Hi, and welcome to Best in Tesla. It's funny how the old car companies with over 100 years of experience can't really predict what will happen to their own company in just 1 or 2 years down the road. Like GM's prediction through the last 6 years has all been changed or cancelled or delayed. But when we look at these lies, missed target, of course, they wouldn't lie. That would be misleading investors. They, of course, wouldn't do that. So they're just very, very, very bad at predicting what will happen within the next couple of years in their own company. But when we look at these predictions and what the old guys have made, it suddenly becomes very clear why they're seeing demand problem for their EVs while Tesla just keeps pulling further away. So let me show you why it might not be the biggest surprise why the old guys are feeling that there is no EV demand out there here in 2023. And let's dive right in. Let's start by looking at some of the claims GM has made. Remember how Mary said that GM was the leader in the EV race?
What does that pie chart look like?
Well, we have said, just like we're the leader today, if you set aside, with the distortion that's happening with the semi shortage, we have been the leader in the United States. We've been number 2 in China. I think we're incredibly well positioned, and we're not going to cede our leadership position to anyone.
Yes, that was just straight up a lie. They weren't leading anything in EV race back then or now. That was just straight up a lie. So the other comments here they have said it's not directly a lie, but just GM missing their target, right? But I did say a couple of years back that this was not going to happen, as there was no indication of GM ramping up production fast enough for this to come true. And we, of course, had GM's track record to look at as well, and they said back in 2017 that within 18 months they would have 2 new EV based on the Bolt platform and 18 more EVs on a new platforms within 5 years. And that was 6 years ago. And that, of course, didn't happen. But that did not stop GM from coming out with even more bullish statement, even though they just completely missed their own targets. And we didn't even get the 2 new EV models within the 18 months. But here we are 6 years later, and they have hardly produced any other EVs in volume that really matters other than the Bolt. And they will shut down the Bolt production in just 1.5 months from now. And they have delayed pretty much every other EV they wanted to get out to the market now, as well as their big battery plants. And the joint venture with Honda to make even more affordable EVs has also been scrapped. But GM didn't learn from their so-called missed target, but doubled down on their EV model as they announced in November 2020. So 2 years before their old target was supposed to be met, they conveniently changed their production target again and said now it would be 30 EV models by 2025. Again, 5 years out in the future. And now, 2 years before that target, GM is changing the target again, saying how they will slow down EV target because EV demand is not keeping up. But that is simply not true, because GM sold 56,414 EVs in the first 3 quarters of 2023. But apparently, there is not enough demand for about 75,000 EVs sold in a year in the US. But then we see Tesla that will probably sell about 650,000 EVs this year just in the US. Talk about the elephant in the room. So no, GM, there is not a demand issue for EVs in general. That is just a lie. But there is a demand issue for your EVs, as they are simply not competitive enough. You are trying to sell an uncompetitive product at an uncompetitive price. Of course, people are going to buy the Model Y instead of the Cadillac Lyriq.
Do you think that you can catch Tesla by 2025?
Absolutely, Phil.
And only back in July of this year, they did say that there was a delay in EV production because of slow battery production. But now, only a few months later, it is not the battery supply anymore, now it is EV demand. But Tesla is not seeing an EV demand. Tesla will grow with more units in the US than GM will sell of EVs. How is that leading, Mary? You are not even keeping up with Tesla's growth. I'm not talking about Tesla's unit, just the growth they did. So how in the hell do you expect to catch up? Especially as you are now slowing down. So to continue to say you will beat Tesla by 2025 is basically a lie in my opinion, as no evidence is showing us you will be even close of doing that.
And win. And we have said that, by mid-decade, we will be selling more EVs in this country than anyone else.
Including Tesla.
Including Tesla.
So they can continue to call it a missed target all they want and blame it on semiconductor and supply chain issue and EV demand and battery supply. And even though only 6 months ago Mary said there was a huge demand for EVs, but apparently all that demand has just disappeared over the last 6 months. But when a little YouTuber like myself can come out with prediction about your targets that are more correct than your own, I'm sorry, but we have to question your sincerity of your targets. Tesla will grow with more units in sale in just the US than GM will produce of EVs totally. Tesla sold in 2022 about 536,000 units in the US. And this year, they look to end the year with something like 650,000 units. So Tesla will grow with about 114,000 units in the US here in 2023. So Tesla basically grew with more units in the US than GM or Ford has even been able to produce and sell of EVs. Even globally in the case of Ford. Not GM, as they are still counting in the Wuling Mini EV in their sale numbers, even though they are not even producing the little shoebox of a car. That is, Wuling and SAIC even owns a part in the little adventure as well. But GM takes all the credits. Just another lie.
You electrified the entire automobile industry. I'm serious. You led, and it matters.
But if we look at Ford instead, in the US, Ford has so far sold about 53,000 EVs with 6,871 units sold in October here, so we should probably not expect Ford to get much higher than 68,000 units sold in 2023. But we should probably put those sales numbers in quotations as they are sold to dealership and not customers. But Ford will report them as sold in their earnings report. But as I showed before, Ford's inventory has skyrocketed for their EVs. And when we look at the F-150 Lightning sales in October with 3,712 units and then look at the inventory in the US as AJ just shared on X, well, on the 17th of October, there was 8,012 Lightnings in inventory, but after Ford has sold 3,700 more Lightnings, the inventory grew with more than 3,200 units. So basically, most of those 3,700 units has just gone straight to inventory. Now that is not looking good in my opinion. So Ford said they were aiming for a production run rate of 210,000 units by the end of 2023, but that was just for their Mark E. But they are nowhere near that, or will be, as we can now see the legacy automakers are slowing down their EV production and taking back their EV production targets. So I don't really see Ford suddenly selling 4 times as many Mark E's over the next month as they did in October, as 12,500 units would be what is needed to have an annual production run rate of 210,000 units. But they only sold 2,732 units in October, so they have a long way to go to get to a run rate of 210,000 of the Mark E. And remember how they back in January 2022 said that Ford is planning to triple production of its upcoming electric pickup truck, the F-150 Lightning, to 150,000 vehicles per year by 2023. If Ford is lucky, they will end the year up close to 25,000 units sold of the F-150 Lightning. So they only had to predict their own production numbers 1 year out in the future, and they missed by nearly 83%. They will only produce 17% of what they said they would do in 2023, and that prediction is not 5 years old, it's from last year. No wonder they are having trouble with their suppliers. When the supplier gets told that it needs to get supplies for 150,000 lightnings by next year, and then 1 year later they're saying, no, we only need 20% of that supply. I would be pissed if I was the supplier to Ford. How can they be this bad at predicting their own production numbers? I know Tesla is late on some models, but they have been able to predict their production numbers ever since 2014, when Elon predicted 500,000 in 2020. That was exactly what happened. And then 50% compound annual growth rate ever since. That is also what is happening. They're actually in front of that. So Tesla being late on a few models only means it is easier for them to meet their production targets when they don't have to ramp up new models, even though they have had some of the fastest growing target in history when it comes to large manufacturers. But that is not what we see with GM. Even though they're down with 20 EV models, their EV production has not sped up at all. All their growth is basically all on the Bolt that GM has been producing since 2016. So for 7 years they have been producing this electric vehicle for the mass market. So much longer than Tesla has even been producing the Tesla Model 3. And why, of course? But is that something you can see on this chart of BEV sales in the US here in 2023? I'm sorry, but this only shows me that they have never been serious about this car. Not something they have planned to scale up like we see Tesla do. This has only been a showpiece.
You led, and it matters.
But in the last couple of years, Tesla has showed the old guys that people did want EVs. And as Elon said many years ago, you had to make an EV better than the ICE car or nobody would want to buy them. So Tesla made the Model S so good that it won the Motor Trend Car of the Year for the last 70 years. So up against all the other cars of the years for the last 70 years, and Tesla's Model S won that reward. And this is the big problem for legacy automakers. They didn't want to make their EVs too good, because then they would steal sales from their profitable ICE business. So as we see, Volkswagen thought they should just come and make an electric car and everything was good, but didn't want to give them the acceleration that could beat the Golf GT, because then why would anyone buy the very expensive Golf GT if they have an EV that was much faster? So they made the product that was inferior to the ICE car to make sure not everyone just jumped ship and bought an EV, because then their company would die. And the same thing with GM and the Bolt. It is not particularly an awesome EV, it's just an EV. Not really better than their ICE cars. And this is the problem. When Tesla has gone all the way, deliberately trying to make the best car possible with the best software and specs on the planet, and the Plaid Model S is, as Elon said himself, nothing but a hardcore smackdown to the ICE car. Nothing with an ICE engine can keep up with the Plaid Model S. And then the old guys makes a second-hand EV with decent specs. But Tesla makes world-leading EVs that kicks ass to any ICE car equivalent around the racetrack, and with software that makes any other Western EV feels like a Nokia, but for a better price, especially after Tesla's price cuts this year. So it might not be the biggest surprise that the old guys is feeling that there is no EV demand, as they are up against Tesla's superior EVs at a much more affordable price. The best example right now is probably the refreshed Model 3 here in Europe up against the ID.3 from Volkswagen. The ID.3 is so inferior in every single way, it's hard to even compare these two cars. And yes, they do have the same range, but Volkswagen is only able to do that because they put in about 20 kilowatt hours more batteries in the car. So it will also be far more expensive to fill up for the owner as well. So the Model 3 refreshed with ventilated seats and screen in the back and the best-in-class safety against the stripped-down cheap EV, the ID.3. But the ID.3 is more expensive. You don't really have to be a fanboy to see there is not really any choice to make. Tesla has already made that choice for you. No one in their rightful mind would ever choose the ID3 over the refreshed Model 3. Of course, the old guys are seeing demand problem for their EVs, as the elephant in the room is sucking up all the demand.
You led, and it matters.
And thank you for watching. And until next time, take care out there and be nice.